All right. What's up, guys? Welcome. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming in. What we're talking about is chasing and representing, which, for anybody who doesn't know, is basically taking a flat sheet of metal, whether it's copper, brass, steel, aluminum, whatever, and making a three-dimensional form. This can be very low relief as far as like how high it is, I'll say, is what we call relief. It can be very low relief, like this. It can also be very high relief, like this. This started from a flat sheet of 20 gauge, 20 gauge brass. This was a piece that I made in a face workshop with Douglas Pryor. But basically, you can do a whole lot of things with this. You can make jewelry, you can make a medallion or a pendant, which is what we're going to do today. You can you can do this with armor. If you ever look in a lot of the, I'll say, Eastern countries, places like Tibet, China, anywhere where there's Buddhism and monks and things, if you look at metal temple doors that are metal, it's all done through this art, which is a little bit crazy to think about, but it is super old, and I'm gonna do my best to try to spitball this. So we're gonna get started. Zip circle. So just a general overview. Everything I'm doing now is going to be chasing, which is top down, as in pushing metal. Repousse would be if the piece was flipped over and I'm pushing from the back, which is good, but I don't like it as much because it's just a couple of examples. This is a kind of, it's hard to see the face, but that's an eye. That's a dragon that's going to be at the point of the cornet. A lamp, which is a baronial pulling medallion here. This we made on site. Pretty good relief. Looks super cool, three-dimensional. And then I'll just go over. So this is what we're going to create minus what I'll call the nest, which is like the bottom ground line portion. So this is what we're going to make. Now these kind of lines and inlaying we're not going to do. It's just going to be solid raised for time purposes. This piece took me about 4 hours start to finish, but through the power of attempts, this is what we're going to make. So a couple of things to go over. Hey, I want to get started. What do I need? Number one, you need a pitch pot. There are some you can buy. There are some you can very much easily just purpose. This is what I use. This is a metal pie tin that I got from Goodwill for like 50 cents. You need a sandbag. You can purchase them. You can buy them. You can also, so sand is fantastic. You can also ideally use lead shot. It absorbs the energy a lot better. It is a little bit expensive, but if you can get somewhere where you can get free, or thank you for choosing Zoom. Okay, no time limit. But if you can get a good shipping deal on lead shot, it's ideal. What I use is literally a blank, non-printed canvas grocery bag that I filled with the finest sand that I can, and then I just hand stitch the edges very terribly, but it works very well. You're going to need hammers. Ideally you want different weight hammers, but you don't need it. Like if you wanted something super basic setup, you can find a basic chasing hammer. If you like the pistol grip, it really helps. It fits in the hand well. Fairly light. Lighter version that we'll use. This is probably a 2-ounce head, which is very light, maybe 3. I had a hammer, which is my middleweight, which was this, but it broke when I was making the test piece because, you know, wood breaks. So we don't have this. And unfortunately, because of that, at one point, we're going to have to use giant ball-peen hammer of death because that's what we have on hand. But I'm also going to incorporate something small that's not, we're gonna actually not use the metal end, we're gonna use, I think it's some kind of plastic polymer. We're gonna use this for dishing. I'm also gonna use a wooden mallet. This has been sanded. It's going to be sanded a lot more to a kind of cone point for dishing. Not necessary, but it helps a lot. And then chisels. So all of the tools that we're going to be used are technically classified as chisels, but you normally, except for a couple, don't want them very sharp. So we are going to use things basically the size of a railroad spike. That's just a big rounded edge, all the way down to the smallest, which is a curved liner. It won't focus. At the point of that, it's basically a U shape. So I'm going to go over when I use different tools, I'm going to show them and try to talk through all the steps and see if we can do this. I've never done a demonstration or taught a class about this, so bear with me. And if anybody has questions along the way, let me know. So right now, step one, you're going to take flat sheet. I like copper. Copper and brass are usually the most predominant. Steel's a little bit less forgiving. For copper, it's a lot, well, it's about the same price as brass, but it's a lot more forgiving. You don't have to anneal it as much. Annealing, for anybody who doesn't know, as you work metal and move it, crystals form on a kind of micro level, and it makes it super hard. So you have to then heat it and quench it, and it softens it up. Copper is much easier for that. You have to do it half as much, if not a third as much. So what we're going to do, so you would start with flat sheet of copper. You're then going to either draw directly on the metal, or you can take a piece of paper like we did. This was just drawn with a Sharpie, and then I used rubber cement to adhere. Now there are some other options, and I don't know the name of this. The name on the back is Mako, but I don't know what it's called. This was printed. This was Sun Wheels that was used on their Majesty's garb this last reign. And this is basically like sticker paper. So I can cut out these designs and then peel off the back and stick, and it's amazing. But you can literally just draw on a sheet of copy paper and just put some rubber cement, which is what this residue is. I don't know if you can see it or not. And then just stick it on and you're good. Now we're gonna start with the lining process, which is basically, sorry, I'm doing my best, outlining the design so that we have it set. And then everything else we do after, we know where our design is and we can do it. There are two ways to do that. One is just to do it barely light enough to create the design, which is what we're gonna do. You can also, depending upon what you're doing, line it a little bit harder in order to have a depression on the back. And I don't have a good example. Actually, I might. It's a little bit mucky, but if you look at this, you can see those lines that are pushing out, that was actually done from the top. But everything we're gonna do is top down, so we're not worried about it. So first thing we're gonna do is take a liner, which is a very pointed, it's about the size of a knife edge, but it's not sharp. There we go. So we're gonna take this liner. Now I've already done the circle and what will be the grounding nest. So what we're gonna do is do the bird and then all of this. We're gonna take a somewhat medium-sized hammer and we're just gonna start tapping, and this is where hammer noise happens. And if you can't hear me over the hammering, let me know. So I'm gonna take this basically at the point of the feathers or the tail. And when we do this, we're gonna have a little bit of an up angle. And the reason why is we want the liner to ride as we're hammering, so we don't have to really physically move it. It should glide by itself. So we're gonna start lining. Very light taps. And at the end, I'm going to change the canter to finish the line so it's nice and crisp. We're then going to try to take it at the end of the other point, and we're now going to do, switch hands, we're now going to do this line all the way to where the beak will meet. So that's the wrong side of the chisel. There we go. And we're gonna tap. Very light taps. You don't wanna go too deep. And with the right angle, the chisel will, sometimes it slips. The chisel will do the work. You don't want to think of this as hammering. Most of what you're doing with this art is allowing the weight of the hammer to just do the work. You're literally just moving it, which is why having different weights of hammers is beneficial, but not necessary. So we're gonna keep, I'm just gonna talk and keep going. So we did that, and now we're gonna take from the back of the head around. Again, this is a straight liner, it's just a straight line, but we can curve it like a pen, essentially. So we're gonna do this. Flipped. Just realized one thing I forgot to talk about. So pot, this is a pie tin. There's a lot of different options out there. Easy Google. What is in this is called pitch. Yes, that is the same pitch that they used in medieval times and Neanderthal times to make arrowheads, all of that. This is a pine-based resin. What I have in this pot is German red pitch. Generally speaking, very attainable. Most pitches are about the same cost. This is about 10 bucks a pound. Really not great, but it'll last a long time. You can get harder or softer pitches, which is usually attained to temperature, as far as like how much you need to heat it to get it mushy or how long it will retain heat. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and obviously most of us are in Atenveldt, but in Tucson, Arizona, it gets really hot. So I'm actually probably going to go to a harder pitch that retains heat more, because this gets super mushy and the piece moves around. But generally speaking, if you had to just buy one, just Google German red pitch. Otherwise, Liza Nechampkin, Nechampkin, Liza Nechampkin, really awesome chasing artist. She used to work, she was actually a chaser for Tiffany & Company. And she makes her own pitch. It's about the same price, and it's absolutely amazing. I'm going to pick up a good bit of it, and if you're going to get into this or have any interest, Gabe, looking at you, get the Nechampkin stuff. So we're going to shut up for a couple of minutes and keep lining. We're going to go top of the head crest down. And as we're going, we're very slightly curving the chisel. It moves very easily. We get to the break point, and we're just gonna slightly angle, and then it rides into the next line. Super easy. We pre-did that. Now we're gonna go the front side of the crest. Okay. Now we're gonna do this kind of swirl line in the body of the bird. In case it wasn't obvious, or in case I forgot to mention it, this is going to be a pelican medallion for the FCA. Now, this is right about the point where it gets a little bit curvy. I can do it with this straight liner, but I don't prefer it. So we're gonna switch tools to a small curved liner. This is the one that has that kind of half moon shape, but it's super tiny. But it's going to allow us to very easily navigate these curves. With a curved liner, for larger curves, I'll just use it and it'll naturally do that. For any super tight things like we're going to do for the eye or the blood drop, then you can actually curve it more and you can get a really tight circle. If any of this is not making sense, let me know. But we're going to keep the curved liner, make sure we're facing the right way. And now we're going to do the blood drop and the eye. So we're going to start at the wider base blood drop. Now for this, I'm still going to use the curved liner. Try to show this. Right now, we're on the back side of the drop, which isn't a very steep curve. We have a very tiny tool. So we're going to use the curved liner like a straight one, and it's just naturally going to navigate that big curve. And then we can get around this really tight spot. Make sure we're angled correctly. Boom. Reset the tool. Yeah, we dropped it. Just getting a basic outline. All this is for is so that we have a design after we fire this. Now we're just going to go in a circle around the eye so we have it for later. Okay, and check my lines. Fun fact of the day, when you have a liner or a pointed, if you ever look at a design as it's on the pitch and you're wondering whether you've gone over it, like I can see the copper underneath where I've chipped away at the paper, but in case you can't, you can just take that liner and run it over and you'll feel the ledge. So like right here, I can feel it. I know I did that earlier. I can feel it, but over here, it just runs smooth. So I know I haven't done that. We're gonna go back to the medium straight liner. We're gonna do the beak all the way around in a circle. Little bit of an up angle again so that the chisel kind of flows along. Complete that circle, and then we just double check to make sure we got all the lines, and we're good. So at this point, we have not an annealed piece of copper. We got our design down. We got it lined. I'm going to use not my tool. I'm going to use probably a screwdriver. I don't have a flat screwdriver. So we're going to use our liner to just kind of scrape away the paper. And because it's rubber cement, it'll come up pretty easily, depending, and it should. Normally it will peel. This is not cooperating. And as we can peel it, it's going to be better than just pushing, but not all of it comes up. Sometimes paper tears.
Are you using the rubber cement specifically just so it is easier to pull off?
Yes. So hey, Zipser.
Hey, buddy.
So ideally, and for you, Zipser, I don't know what this is,
Okay.
but Her Excellency Tinka got this for me when we collabed on this project. This is the ideal. This is the best thing I've ever had, and you just make design through the power of the internet and then print it in a normal printer, and you can just peel and stick. The reason why I'm doing this with the rubber cement is because generally speaking, it does come up fairly easily. You can
Okay.
also use spray adhesive. You can probably use like Elmer's stick glue.
I've used a
Um,
stick glue before, but it doesn't peel up very easily. Like, I mean, it sticks to it, obviously. It's pretty nice. So if you're planning on immediately annealing afterwards, but yeah, having rubber cement just so it's easier to peel up is super smart. So,
yeah, it's decent. The printer stuff that I just showed comes up 100% easier than this rubber cement,
oh, nice.
but it comes up. It's amazing. It comes up in huge blobs, and then you're just done. The rubber cement isn't bad. So this is a terrible apprentice moment. Yes, I'm an Atenveldt, and I'm also a terrible apprentice. I don't have artistic ability to draw or anything like that. So all of these drawings are my wonderful, amazing wife, who without her I could not do this. So drawing directly on the copper or on the metal is difficult. So I realized, hey, I can have her draw on paper and then do this. So ideally, if drawing on metal is easy, or you can use a pencil or a Sharpie and it's okay, it's difficult. But if you can do that, that's perfect, because then you just anneal it and you're good. But if you're going to use paper and you don't have that wonderful wizardry printing option, the rubber cement has been a recent endeavor, but it's not bad. Now I could just fire this away, but I don't want to have as much cleanup. So I'm going to take, this 4 minutes and just get most of it up. We're almost done. Yeah. I'm sorry this is super candid, everybody. I've never taught this before or shown this before, so you're gonna have to bear with me. So we're mostly cleaned off. This side was already done ahead of time just because I had a double piece, and frankly, Industrial Metal Supply is closed, and this is the only piece I had, so I might as well use two. So at this point, we're lined. We got our residue off for the most part. There's some rubber cement, but no big deal. And this is where you want to take the most important tool in chasing repousse, which is your wife's butter knife. And we're going to use this to pop the thing out. Now, you can get piece out of copper or out of pitch two ways, one of which is through heating it and pulling it out, but then you get a bunch of pitch. I like to have it cold so I can just chip it out. So I have a little bit of a lip right here where I can just get under it, and I'm gonna just literally place butter knife, take hammer, very lightly tap. It will quite literally chip out or pop out. Get under it. Now, if you're doing it this way versus the goopy method, I like to place my hand on and over where I'm hitting this because you will get small fragments of pitch, and this stuff is expensive. So you want to try to protect that and just, you'll hear that hollow sound. So we're good. We're almost there. Change directions. Bam. So even with very lightly tapping, I don't know if anybody can see this, but we have, they're not thick, but they're very large pieces of pitch that have come out. This is why we place our hand to protect it. So we're out, we're lined, we're good. Now we're gonna take our pitch pot out of our sandbag and we're gonna dish this. The reason why, now you don't always have to do this, but for this piece, I want it to have a decent bit of relief. I want it to be fairly up there, but we don't want to have to stretch the metal too much. I took a 3-day class with a master artist in this, Douglas Pryor. He's amazing. Check him out on Instagram. Amazing stuff. And the biggest thing that I learned from that 3-day class was, despite metal being hard, imagine it's clay. So we're literally going to move this and just adjust it like we would a ball of clay. But you can't stretch a ball of clay forever. It will run out of material and it will fail. It'll stretch, it'll tear, it'll rip. So we're going to avoid that. And one of the ways we avoid that is by pre-shaping to get most of the relief. So we're going to take this face down, and I'm going to have to dish both of these, and I apologize, but it won't take super long. So we're going to start with hammer, mallet, wooden. I like softer hammers for dishing because it doesn't stretch the material as much. It just shapes it better. So this is gonna be a little loud. Apologies. We're gonna stand up. Drinks are required when you're in the shop. So we're gonna dish this. We're just gonna basically just hit pretty much straight down. Checking where we're going. So with this, we got this part good. We need to get the rest of it. So I'm gonna place my finger as a reference. Over dishing is going to be better than under dishing. So I'm literally just mallet, just mashing. So right now, we have a pretty mangled piece of metal, but that's totally okay. We're almost done because we're gonna flatten it afterwards. Just trying to get basically a nice dome. I've got to flatten this. This has to be off camera because the camera is held up by my vise, and I need my vise to flatten this. So right now I'm gonna take this to the flat of my vise or an anvil or a hard flat surface, and we're gonna basically just flatten the edges and leave this raised, and then I have to do this because that's the way we did this. So just flattening the edges around with the flat part of our mallet. You can absolutely use a metal one for this. For the edges, it's not a big deal. I just happen to have it on the same hammer.
Are you just putting the part of the piece that you're trying to flatten on the anvil, or are you putting the whole piece on the anvil?
So basically, oh, this is hard to describe. Imagine this is my anvil and it's flat. This is the mallet that I'm using. I'm going to place it basically here on the edge, and I'm going to work it just the edges. Going to work it around. Sometimes I might have to angle up or down depending upon how bent it is, but I'm just going to place the edge on the flat surface and work the flat surface. Does that make sense? Cool.
That's good.
With a big hammer, I'm only using the front like 25%, because I don't want to hit the middle of it. So I'm just using the edge of the hammer. So we're there. We have a decent dome, and that's going to get better with more. So now we have piece, and it's hard to see, but you can see that dome. And we're going to gather in more relief, which is like making it more raised. But this is about here. So I need to go for like 30 seconds. What I'm going to do is go fill my kitchen sink with some water. The best setup in my mind would be to have a stationary metal surface or concrete surface, take a couple of fire bricks to make like a kind of U shape, and you just stick it, and you have a giant propane torch or oxyacetylene torch if you really want to do it quickly, and you just red heat. So we have a piece of copper, vice grips, again, whatever you need to not make fire by your hands. So what we're going to do, this is going to be boring and a little bit off camera. This is MAP gas, which burns hotter than propane, which is why I got it, but it's expensive, so we're not going to use it for everything. We just use it for annealing. What you want to do is heat the copper, pretty much all of it, as red as you can get, and as soon as it's there, immediately quench it in water. So I have a kitchen sink over there because my shop doesn't have as much space as I'd like, and it's also storage. So this is very boring. I'm just going to heat this. It's going to take about 3 to 5 minutes, probably, well, larger piece, probably about 5 minutes. And then I'm going to immediately walk it over there as I'm still quenching. Ideally, you just have a big like bin or a bucket, and you could just done. What this does is it makes it like thick paper. It makes it super malleable. So this is going to be boring. I apologize, and I don't know how loud it's going to be with the fire. But we're pretty much there. If you'll notice, this orange sheet of copper is pretty much black. I was in the darkest room that I have. Ideally, if you're in the dark, it should be pretty easy to tell when it's nice and red. But in case you're not, where it's bright like this in the day, the blacker it is, the hotter it is. So we're pretty much there. I'm going to go quench this. I'll be right back. So we got it nice and pretty red. And then when we drop it in, it's going to get this residue, this black, because fire. Now, couple ways to get that off. The best solution is to have a pickle solution, not like pickle juice. You can just Google jewelry pickle solution. It's basically super acidic. Crock pots work best. You turn it on, get it nice and warm, stick it in, and it's going to eat all this stuff away. I am a hobo knight, and I do not have that ability. What we do have is a power drill. So what I do, because I'm lazy and I don't have a lot of space, is we're going to take power drill, not with the metal wire brush, although it works. It just takes off too much material. Acrylic brush. We're just going to stick this in here, and we're going to take off that residue. And just to make it clean so it's easy to see, this will be very loud.
His mic does do a good job of muting stuff.
Apparently, yeah, because I can barely do it.
Yeah, like the moment it fired up, it quieted down. That's actually pretty impressive.
What's that?
Your mic does a really good job. Like when you fired up the drill, like we heard it for half a second, and then it almost muted it.
Oh, nice. That's my wizardry. That's my night level.
Ah, I see.
Right, so what
All right,
kind of
so
brush was that?
say that again.
What kind of brush was that? I didn't get a really close look at it.
So this is I'll call it an acrylic. It's a plastic brush. I got this from Ace Hardware. I like the plastic because it doesn't remove as much as material, but you can honestly, and what I did up until I got this piece, like all of my stuff, I just got a wire brush that
Yeah.
has an attachment, and you just stick it in the drill, and it's really light. You're not, like, we're not sanding this, we're not doing anything except taking off the icky black. It's super easy. It just brushes it away. It does create, some lines that you can see in the light, but it's not a big deal, because at the end of all of this, you're gonna polish it, or you're gonna blacken the background or whatever. So all we're doing is removing the yuck. And honestly, if you have a pickle solution, you just set it in and forget it for 20 minutes, and then you take it out and put it in a baking soda water solution, and then it's good.
Oh yeah, I've got a pickle pot. It's not nearly big enough to do that, but it's one of the little mini crock pots. So there you go.
Exactly. So, and this is I normally don't make pieces this big. Normally, average size is about here. So the circle is about the size of my cheek. This is larger because that's what I had left, and I can't buy more right now. So. All right, so this is where we're going to transition. So we're lined, raised, annealed, cleaned off, ready to go. What you would do here is take some pitch, break some off. Whatever the cavity is, you want to fill that so there's no air pockets. It's very, very important. The whole reason that we're using pitch is because it basically prevents the metal from collapsing on itself when we're doing the sculpting. It provides the backing. So I'm going to stop using this piece, and we're going to transition to one that I preset, which is basically the same setup, except we've gathered in the ends. Now, you'll notice this big section right here, and I forgot a line here. So I'm going to show this next process. So for this short piece, that's the same thing I'm doing for all the rest of it. But to fit in a 2-hour time slot, I had to do this. So, and Gabe, this is where you're pretty much set up and ready to go. So I'm taking pitch, I'm just breaking up, and I'm just putting it in that cavity, and we're gonna heat this separately. We're gonna heat this first, then warm the pitch so that the metal is not too hot when we need to put it in. But you wanna make sure that you completely fill this, again, so there's no air bubbles, because if you hit an air pocket when you're chasing down and sculpting, it's gonna collapse on itself, and that's when bad things happen. I'm going to break off some pieces with my most utilitarian tool, the butter knife. And I'm gonna gather this from the edge because I have some muck. If anybody has general questions or anything, this is the perfect time to ask me, or more explanation, because this will take a little bit for me to heat and set and wait. So if anybody has anything, I'm all ears. I'm an amazing instructor. No one has questions. Class is dismissed. Just kidding.
Hi, I did have a question. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. Well, I guess two. One of them was, how much did this all cost you to set up? Like, if you don't have anything to make fire or anything, or any chisels or
whatsoever.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of some more expensive options, but that doesn't mean that's what you absolutely need, if that makes sense. So, for instance, my torch, on off. This is like 30 or 40 bucks, depending upon where you live and how much it is. You can get one for 10 that you just light with a lighter. So $10 for that. I'm gonna say pie tin is $1 from Goodwill. Sand was $3. The bag was $1 because this is a grocery bag. Chisels you can make yourself as long as you can get tool steel, which the the amount of money will depend upon how thick it is. For instance, the cost of a bar of this is a lot more than the cost of a bar of that, if that makes sense. But I would say, and Gabe actually in this class bought a set of masonry tools, masonry chisels, and he did them to get rid of the hardening and then shaped some, and it's enough to work. So realistically, I don't know, $50 would, well, no, because you need the hard part is the pitch. This is the most expensive. This is 10 pounds of pitch. That's about $100, but it lasts a long time. I've had this pitch for 3 years and I haven't had to buy any more. Outside of the pitch, $50. If you have if you can get a set of masonry chisels cheap from Harbor Freight, you have a belt sander and a buffer wheel, which if you don't, in the SCA, there's enough people around. If you went, hey, does anybody have this? It's going to be super readily available. Yeah, so like, I don't know, because you can like these chisels I made. I bought a set, all of these small ones, I bought in a set for $200 from the class, but there was also 20 of them, and they're super high quality. But you can make your own super basic setup outside of pitch, $50 if you have a little bit of time and resources.
If you want like a super cheap option, and Demetrios, I don't mean to take over for a sec. If you want like
No,
a
please,
super
please.
cheap option and you just want to try it, something that moves a little bit as well, but not nearly as well. You can't get the same depth that Demetrios is showing us. But if you buy, like go to the store and you buy like a 4x4 block of wood, you can always take like screws and washers and basically screw your, the piece to the piece of wood. And then you can go and use that. And that's a kind of a super cheap alternative. You don't get a lot of the benefits you get from pitch, but yeah.
If you'll notice, it's not 4x4, but this was a piece that has pitch on it because I used this for a cornet that I wanted to raise. So you can literally, and Zipser has had great success using wood. I have not, because I don't have like a stump and I didn't start there. So I didn't want to, I just didn't need to, but yes, Zipser has a fabulous option for that. You can just use wood. You can't get as high a relief, but you can do a pretty good setup. He's made some awesome stuff. Yeah, if you have a somewhat lightweight hammer, you can buy a single rod of tool steel, or you can find like screwdrivers, chisels, anything like that. You can repurpose them. And if you use wood and you have a decent hammer, it's super cheap. So one thing with pitch, generally speaking, when you're heating, it's very heat sensitive. I now realize why people use this to set people on fire, because it gets incredibly hot. It's incredibly sticky. And for anyone who's worked with metal, hot metal looks like cold metal. And that's the same thing with pitch. And the thing about pitch is it sticks to you while it's burning you, which is fantastic. So you want to be very careful when you're heating, which I'm going to show you in a second. I'm not the best at it. I'm still figuring out the angles, but you don't want it to be smoking. Sometimes it will no matter what, but you don't want it to be bubbling a bunch because then you're burning away material. So right now, right off camera, I'm using torch and I have a pitch that I'm backfilling the recess that we did with the cavity, which for that one is more because it's a little bit further along. Okay, so now we're going to now we switched from MAP gas to propane because it burns lower. I'm going to show this as best I can, and we're just going to heat the whole thing. You want to make sure you get the edges and everything about as even as possible, because if we're hammering the middle and the edges are cold, it's going to crack and spread and provide mayhem. So, very lightly brushing, a little bit of smoke, but we're not bubbling. You want to make sure that we're moving around. And as the pitch changes heat, as the pitch changes heat, it's going to go from a dull to a glossy. We want it to look like pudding. So, example of what badness looks like. Look, you can see it over here. I'm going to show you what too much heat looks like. A little bit of fire. You see the black bubbling. You can't see it. Black bubbling, bad. So while we're mostly heated, we're going to take our other piece. It's a little bit hot. This is too hot. I'm going to take the ends. I'm going to take the 4 corners, and I'm going to pinch them up so that it grabs into the pitch. This is too hot. I should have done this. Should do this before you heat with pitch in it, pro tip. But I'm gonna lightly grab with vice grips, and I'm just gonna use the corner of my anvil or my flat surface. Imagine this is my anvil. I'm just gonna take it like this with just the corner popping up, and I'm just gonna roll it over. I'm gonna keep this heated. Almost there, but not quite. Okay, take this, stick it in the middle, push it down. I'm gonna grab 2 giant things, it doesn't matter what they are, but you don't want your hands. And we're gonna push this into the pitch to make sure that it fills in all the back. It, in my experience, will not sink in evenly, so you have to have, I like 2 of them. It also, when you let go, will come back up. So you have to periodically change what you're doing as the pitch is cooling. Now, I'm gonna use a little bit of a regneck trick in a second and make this cool faster, but I need it to be in there enough to be set before I stick it in the freezer. And the freezer is just to cool it overall so we can work it with time. Normally, once it's good and not moving, you could just let it sit, but that'll take too long for our purposes. So, and I'll explain where we're at with this piece and the differences in a minute, but I'm gonna show the step to get there. And Gabe, you're already there, right? Gabe hates us. He doesn't want to talk.
He's not showing this video anymore. So what are you looking for? You had mentioned that you're pushing it down to make sure that it's in there, but like, what are you looking for in particular to make sure that it's set? And
Thank
that it's
you.
deep enough.
Thank you. So I don't want it to like spill over like that. I don't want it to run into the piece. But as I'm pushing, and thank you, thanks, Sipser. I'm pushing just enough to where, as I'm pushing, it rises up just a little bit above the level of the copper. Because I'm going to heat, and we're going to be hitting this thing down, and it's going to get all the way. But I just want to make sure that there's just the slightest bit of grab. If you can imagine, I don't know, not like staples, but like shield edging, how it's like the whole shield, but just the edge kind of wraps around. You just want it to come up a little bit above. And I'll try to show a better detail. So it's very slight. Very slight, just enough. I'm going to take this, stick it in the freezer because it's very hot to the touch. And if we start hammering this, then it's going to move around and bad things are going to happen. I'll be right back. So that is sitting in the freezer so that it can cool quicker than it would through the power of nature.
Okay, my husband had a question.
Yeah, please.
He wanted to know about what kinds of metals you can do this with, or if you need like more elaborate setups for different kinds of metal.
Generally speaking, no. The most common applications are going to be copper, brass, and steel. Now, you can also do this. I don't know if you guys have ever seen big Japanese metal sculptures, like animals, like lions and cats and bunnies that are like this big or like my size, but they're iron. All of that is done with this, which is a totally different level. But the setup is only going to be dictated by the size of your piece. So I'm making a pelican medallion. That's how big it's going to be, right? If that was my chain, it's not too big. I have a pie tin. It's way more than adequate. Douglas Pryor, the artist that I took a class from, made a, I don't know, 6-7 foot tall elephant head. And and that required a great deal. But the fact that he did it out of steel as opposed to copper doesn't make a difference. It's just about the size of the piece and what you're doing. So because I'm doing a lot of pretty basic shapes, I'm not like, if this was copper, I could take this and make it into a gerbil, let's say. And if I'm going to do that, I need ball stakes, I need vices to hold them, I need different hammers, all of that. But if I'm going to make small pieces like this, the same setup applies for copper, brass, steel. You theoretically could do aluminum, but it doesn't really anneal, and it's kind of annoying. But copper, brass, steel are the most common. You could also do iron in the same way. So the setup is just dictated by the size or the intricacy of the piece you're doing. Does that make sense?
Volunteer.
Yes,
What was
thank
that?
you. But what made you decide copper? Is it cost or anything?
It's easy to work with. Steel. So for me, I get my copper and brass from Industrial Metal Supply in the scrap bin. It's $5.99 a pound. I like 18 gauge as a generality. I choose copper because now steel is much cheaper, but it's harder to work and it takes a lot longer to anneal, because unlike quenching with copper and brass, with steel, you have to heat it red hot and then let it air cool, super cool, like super long. And it just takes forever. So I don't like it. I haven't worked with it outside of one time. I like copper over brass because brass hardens a lot faster. So with this piece, we only have to anneal once. If this was brass, I'd have to anneal 2 or 3 times. It just hardens a lot faster. But that's why I choose copper. So I'm going to explain. I'm changing pieces. We're not going to use this one that we started with. We're going to use a different one that I prepped. The step that we're doing is I'm taking a very large chisel that is rounded. There's no hard edges. It's a big oval and it's super polished. You don't want any hard edges here. And what we're doing is, let me see if I can get it to myself. There we go. So I'm going to take this chisel, Big'em. This is giant. And we're going to basically gather in material. If you remember earlier when I talked about how metal moves like clay, we're going to make high relief, which means we need material in the base of the bird where it's going to have a big vertical wall. So we're going to be taking this and we're going to gather in material like clay from the edges all the way around. Just literally just, and I take it at not a straight down angle, but probably a 45 because we want to push the copper. I know it's weird to think about. You're literally pushing copper where you need it. So we're going to push copper in all the way. Now, the piece that I have is 90% of that is done because it takes a little bit of time, and this is what we got to do. So what I'm going to do, if you'll notice, I'm going to grab a pointer. It's been gathered from this point all the way around. I'm going to have to do, I forgot right there, but it's been gathered all the way around, and this is where I'm going to show you what that looks like, and I'm going to turn it to make it easier. We start from pretty outside edges, generally speaking. It depends upon how dished it is to begin with, which this was not super dished. So I needed to gather, it both gathers and it also depresses the background. So we started with a level that was here. This is probably a 1/4 of an inch here. It's probably 1/2 an inch difference here. And so that's the 2-part way that we get relief, is we form it initially, and then I'm sinking the background in. So this is the piece, I'm sinking it all in. So we're going to end up with something that looks like this. But when we take it out of the pot and we take it to our anvil or our flat surface and we flatten it, it goes, and then all of a sudden it's up here. Magic. So for this, we've done 90% of it. I'm going to show this part and this part. It's in the freezer for about 5 minutes. It's still slightly warm to the touch. I'm going to heat the outside of my pitch pot just to make sure it's all good. And then I'm going to start with this little piece, and I'm gonna explain more when I'm doing it here. So here we go. Propane, not MAP gas. Just a light warm. And then I'm gonna highlight the heat around where I'm working without making scraps, apparently. Okay. If I'm working a certain area with big movements, yes, I'll get a little bit of that bubble. That bubble tells me when I'm good. So we're gonna take giant chisel, and this is where I would normally use about a 6 to 8 ounce hammer, but as you can tell, it's no longer a hammer. So unfortunately, this is the only thing I have on hand. So don't use this, but I have to. So I'm gonna be here. Now, you're not gonna see this part. I'm gonna show this part better for angle. I'm just gonna knock this out. We're gonna take this, and we're gonna take this and gather it in. This is what it looks like before. I need to stand up for angle. This is that area that was then, that it was raised and it had a line. So we just knocked it down. Again, this is way too heavy of a hammer, but I don't have a better middle ground option because my hammer broke the day before I started this. So what we're gonna do is figure out the angle. Does that work? That works. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start on this side and move this way. This is the portion. Busti Malaka. This is the portion that's still raised, or rather not depressed. So we're gonna, from this side over, we're gonna gather in from the outside and gather in material, making sure we don't create any hard lines. Hard lines are bad in chasing because they create cracks and distress points in the metal. So we're gonna heat this part. And we're gonna get giant hammer of death. That's the scientific name. And again, big, giant, rounded chisel, and I'm gonna get to work. This is the one portion of this project where I'm hitting it fairly hard because I just need to move a lot. Now, if you can see, this is a pointer. The outline of the medallion is gonna be, it's hard to see, about here. I'm pushing it in, I would say about a 1/16 of an inch to that, and then we're gonna finish it up later. So I'm getting it just close enough to the edge, but not quite, because we're gonna use a different tool for that later. I hope this isn't too loud. If it is, I can mute it.
Not too loud at all.
Sweet. So it started here and we've walked it into there. Now I'm doing this at different portions so it doesn't create hard striations or hard lines. Again, we're doing about a 45-degree angle so that the chisel naturally moves as we're hitting, and we don't have to push with this hand. It's only using the hammer, and it will walk itself in and push that Play-Doh where we need it. Sorry, angle. I don't want to hit my phone. We're going to heat this just a little bit. This portion with a deep relief is going to be the hottest this pitch is going to be. But we want it softer so it doesn't fight us because we're moving so much. You can do it colder, it just takes longer. There we go. Ow. Hot metal. Rebracing my sandbag. So you saw what that looked like, and now all of it is gathered in about to the edge of the medallion. If you can look, you'll see the line right there, and you can see where that is. It's not quite there, but it's really, really close. What we're going to do is take another large tool. This is much more slender. It's almost a point, but it's rounded. Again, super polished. You don't want hard edges for anything but a liner. And we're going to use this to gather in the last bit. Now, I'm going to do my best. So what we're going to do is we're going to start below where we need it to be. We're going to walk the copper up that vertical wall. And we're going to use this pointed chisel to do that. This is where I want my other hammer that broke. I've got to use giant hammer of death. I'm going to super choke up on this because that's a thing. Where can you see it? You can see it from this angle. It's not going to be easy to see this, guys. I really apologize. The key with this step is to slowly walk it up. I'm going to start here, and I'm just moving that copper. And as you're doing this, you'll literally see it moving like Play-Doh. So I'm just starting at a hard 45 and then walking it up. And Gabe, this is where you should be doing that. Sorry, Gabe is following along and did some homework ahead of time so he could do this. That's moving a lot in my sandbag.
Question.
I hate this giant hammer. It's not working. Smaller hammer. I'm going to use a similar thing, but a smaller size because I need to use a smaller hammer. Same shape. Can you see that? You can see that. Okay, at least relatively well. Ow. Now, after this class, I'm going to take smaller chisels and really finalize it up. But you basically get the idea. We're walking up in order to create a vertical wall for that relief. But we need to gather material as we're moving so that it doesn't split or tear. Almost done.
Question.
So right now, if you can see how out that looks, you can kind of see how jetting out it is right there. That's what I'm going to work on right now.
I think there's a question, Demetrius.
Yo. Question?
Question was, what's the back edge of the medallion going to look like? Are you going to roll those edges over, or?
If I was
It's
more
gonna be.
artistically talented, yes. What I've currently been doing, and it's a little bit ghetto, but it works super well. So this is going to be really, really light. It's going to weigh nothing when it's done, but some of it's going to be annealed and some of it's going to be work hardened. What I've found success with is literally taking Bondo and mixing the hardened Bondo, backfilling it, sanding it down to flush, and then just painting it. And it's held up super duper well. Ideally, I don't know that I would roll them. I would, if I was going to do it like super right, I would probably just take a really small file and just file the edges, because overall, unless someone like runs this over with a car, it should be fine. It, like, if you drop it, if you drop something on it, it should be okay. Unless it's super heavy. But you can, I like to backfill it with Bondo and then just sand the heck out of it and paint it. But you could also just file the edges and it should be fine. A lot of times you're going to get some pitch residue in the underside of this. So, and if you burn it out, it's then going to create different residue. So you'd have to pickle it, but either of those are options, or any of those are options. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to make it so I don't like backfilling because I don't want the extra weight. I like somebody to think it's cast.
It's
Then they
nothing.
go, oh, it's so light.
Yeah.
Because you know how it looks like it's a cast piece, but it weighs almost nothing.
But it's not. Exactly.
Right.
And that was, so I made a Pelican medallion very similar to this design that I gifted to the Barony, and it's now the new Pelican of the Barony medallion. And this one, where to go? So this test piece for this class, this is going to go as a gift to her, because she wore it and she only had it for like 2 weeks because they had back-to-back Pelicans. But she even commented on how light and amazing it was, even with the Bondo backfill. It really doesn't weigh much.
Yeah.
But I think the rolling of the edge is much more like artistically better. It looks better. It's cleaner. It's not like, what's this in the back? So I should be able to hear you guys as I'm hammering. I'm just trying to keep for time, so I got to keep working. I apologize. We're just walking it up to that pre-lined medallion edge to make it as clean as we can. And it creates that vertical wall. You want to start at the bottom and walk it up, and it should not tear. It should be very good. Again, we're using a fairly pointed chisel, but it's very rounded, very smooth. And again, guys, in case it wasn't obvious, I am not an expert in this by any means. I'm just doing my best. All right, so we're at the point where we're pretty much good. Later on, after class, before I actually finish it, I'm going to make it a little bit crisper with really small embossers. Stuff like this, which is rounded and oval, and then we're just gonna push in a little bit cleaner. But for right now, theoretically only have a half an hour, which means this is not going to be enough time. So I'm going to take my propane. It's a little bit hard to see, so I'm going to try to show this pointer. This is the line of our medallion right here. But as you can see where the bird is, the rest of this needs to get as flat as we can. So we're going to heat this a decent bit, and then we're going to use, similar to the big giant guy, just a smaller version. Again, it's an oval embosser. It can't focus. I love zoom, but I hate it. It's super rounded. There's no hard edges. It's nice and polished. And we are going to push down all of this a decent bit before we move to smaller chisels. We're not going to touch the inside of the neck cavity. We're not going to touch around the blood drop, and we're not going to touch the head crest. We're just going to do the big area. I'm going to talk a little bit less so I can make up some time, but if anybody has any questions, this is an okay time, and if I don't hear it, have somebody yell at me. Give me 10 seconds. And it's too hot, it's moving. So, fun lesson. If you heat the pitch too much, I don't know if you guys can see that, we're literally just moving our piece. It's too damn hot. So I'm gonna heat this a little more so I can get it resunk, stick it in the freezer. This is what happens when you're overzealous. And we're gonna resync it, stick it in the freezer for 5 minutes, and then we're okay. I thought it was cooler than it was, but apparently it's warming up in Arizona. So again, we're gonna do the same thing, gonna get it just a little bit up on all the edges if we can. It's a little hard because some of it's more depressed than others. But this is what we do. But as you can see, like even right here, right where this chisel is, it's already starting, like we were able to already start to depress that. And this is the magic of this art. In like, it looks like super basic, and then suddenly you have a 3-dimensional sculpture out of nowhere, and it's super cool. This is cooling down right now, and I'm gonna try to hammer through this mid portion. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna depress from the normal, I'm doing this backwards, from the normal medallion line into the back of the bird, and we're gonna depress all of this middle portion and try to get the basic shape around the blood drop. I'm gonna ask less questions, and I'm gonna hammer through that just on video and talk openly as I can.
I like that Demetrius kind of touched on an interesting point in the fact that like metal, in a lot of ways, like it looks like hot garbage like most of the time you're working on it, and then like the last little bit where you're finishing it, like it starts to come together.
Yeah, literally it's like, okay, design, and then it looks like Nick said, like hot garbage, and then like suddenly it's glorious. It's weird.
There's a bunch of like, a lot of it is about kind of the cleanup work at the end. And so like the cool stuff that Demetrius has shown us, where it's how you get that relief and how you get that stuff. It's a big step to get you to that point where you're like, okay, now I can clean this up.
So we're taking, so this is the back line of the bird head right here, and we're starting from where we initially gathered in, and we're just gonna move it up. So we're gonna take this from where we raised all the way up to the back of the bird head. That's what we're doing right now. So fun fact of the day, yeah, it's super frustrating. I didn't even know that annealing was a thing the first time I did this. So I was using brass, which hardens super fast, and then I didn't know to anneal. So I'm literally like trying to make this water bougie, which was awful. And then I show it to my knight, and he's like, "Did you anneal that?" And I'm like, "What's annealing?" Oh my god. That's the wrong tool. All right, so we're using super rounded. We're just gonna slowly walk it up. In this, we're going, so I'm starting at the bottom of where I'm going, and I'm moving up, like I'm scooping ice cream. It's hard for me to show a good angle. I'm doing my best, guys. I'm super sorry. We're not going to get the exact line, but we're going to get it 98% there, and then we're going to take really small chisels later, probably off camera later, and finish it up. Now, we don't want to scoop into the nest line, which is this bottom portion. So we're going to actually go in the middle, and I'm going to, so in the middle, I'm going to depress right here, and then I'm going to work up and down depending upon where I need the metal to go, because I don't want it to stretch too much in one way or the other. Heat it a little bit more. This pitch does not retain heat super well. That's why I'm doing this so often. And then we get nice and deep movement. So with that, we did 3 passes, but if you can see, we got a deep channel, and then we're gonna move from that channel up towards the bird and that channel down towards the nest, which is really just a ledge for now, but now I'm taking, and I'm using this, again, very decent sized chisel. That's my thumb. It's pretty decent sized. And we're moving up, but we don't want to get too close towards the blood drop. So we're moving it up here, and I'm going to do just a little bit right there. And then we're going to move the smaller ones. And I think we might be okay. So here we go. I'm hitting this harder than I normally would because I don't have a heavier weight hammer. Normally with this, it would just be some taps. You're hearing a little bit of feverishness because, you know, that used to be a hammer. There we go. I'm going to turn this. We're going to work it towards the nest. You can see that vertical edge and lip there. So still big chisel. We worked that bottom line pretty close to where that is. We're going to keep working it towards the nest right here. And I'm actually going to switch to a smaller one. So the big ones are done. This is a smaller tool, but it's still fairly wide. Again, this is I'll call it an oval embosser, almost circular, not quite very polished, but we're going to use this to push material up to that ledge where we want to stop. At this point, we should not need to heat the pitch for a while. We should be okay. And you want a little bit harder angle because I can't angle my pitch pot. Time is it? 11:04. We're gonna be okay, guys. I'm gonna stop in about 5 minutes to ask any questions. Okay, so this is gonna be a little bit hard to see in the crest right here. There's a little bit of a deep difference in height. So I'm gonna take that same chisel and I'm going to start here and I'm gonna roll it up to start it just to get it about half of a difference instead of the giant difference that it is. And that's in height. We're gonna roll it up to start that depression because we want it all to be about the same level. So in the middle, rolling up, start from the bottom, gather in, roll up again, a little bit closer, and now you can see how much more defined that is. And that was just with a nice little pass. Now, anytime we're gathering towards something that's going to be having a higher relief, i.e. the nest, the bird, the blood drop, the back of the bird, any of that, we want to start from the bottom and gather in because you want to make sure that when you're raising towards that high peak, that's where you need your metal. That's where you need your material. You need your putty. So you don't need it in the back. And if it's going to split, a split in the back is much better. We want to avoid that, which we should be able to, but you just want to move it up towards where you're going to go vertically, if that makes sense. Keep going.
Is that background going to eventually be flat?
Pretty close. Not exactly flat. I probably could, but I don't think it's necessary in this particular piece. In this lamp, this was all a big giant dome, and we got all of it flat minus that. But for the Pelican, it's going to come out like this. Now, these notches aren't going to be here, but if you look at it, this background and the inside background are not the same level, but you can't really tell. It's a really small difference, but it's a big difference in work to get that last little bit. But for this, I don't think it's necessary, because for the eye, you just see high, low, done. And the rest of the background is going to get cut out, so it won't matter. I'm working around the horn of the back of the head, I guess. We're still using that same medium oval embosser. Starting from the bottom, now we're here. Oh, we hit a lip. That's not good. Hit a hard point. This is going to be hard to show, but if you can look at the horn of the back of the head, there's a little bit of a ledge forming, and I need to push that in, but I can't do that well on camera. So I apologize. I got to move this away for a second. It's the only angle I can get it. Let me show this beforehand. So look at the very back point of the head. If you see where the line is, and you see that ledge just below it. That's what we're going to fix. I'm using a sharp angle with my chisel. And we're just very gently walking it in. Now, it's much more flush. So this is about the point that Zipser was talking about, where it magically starts to come together. I'm going to heat this a little bit. We're going to work. Where's my liner? I lost my liner, guys. There it is. So we worked all this. Later on, I'm going to go back here with a planisher, but and I'll just explain that. So basically, for the background, we're going to get a basic depression shape, and then we're going to take a planisher or two. Planishers are very flat bottomed. They can have a little bit of an edge. It's not a big deal. These are just used in this application to smooth out the background. So we're going to take this later, and we're going to smooth out all the depression in between the nest and the bird, and then we're going to get in between the blood drop and the bird and all that. That's probably going to have to be off camera, or at least part of it, because it's 11:11. So we're going to take a little bit of heat, and we're going to work in between the bird and the blood drop on both sides. We're going to walk it in, and then we're going to go down. And then we're just going to fill out this way, fill out that way. Trying to move equally on both sides so it doesn't stretch it as much as we can. It's going to a little bit, but it shouldn't have an issue. We're going to heat. Two tools. Same medium-sized oval embosser, a little bit more pointed embosser, still the same idea. Nice and rounded, nice and polished, no hard edges. We're going to start with the bigger one. Ouch, hot. And we're going to walk it up to that blood drop. Now, it feels like I overheated this a little bit, because as I'm hitting, it's just moving down. So I heated this too much, which is okay, but we're not going to work anything that's super intricate like that drop. I'm going to work on the back nest work, and I apologize. That's a thing that happens sometimes. It's a super delicate balance between not enough heat and then suddenly too much heat, and which is where we're at. So I'm just walking along that edge of the nest, getting it to the line that we had when we first started. And now I'm going to walk this part up to the crest of the bird, because we're waiting for the other part to cool. Hitting this a little bit harder. And now I'm going to switch to, of the three smaller ones, the medium size. We're going to walk it in that cavity. And so with that, we're taking it from here, and we're just walking it in. And now luckily the shape of the chisel works very well for that cavity. So we're just walking it in. 15 minutes left. It's not gonna be enough, guys. I love you, I'm sorry. So we're gonna do our best right here. All right. Super steep angle, walking it to the bottom edge of the blood drop from top down. I just hit the camera. We're going to switch back to the larger size of the small, if that makes sense. And we're going to very lightly start the depression. This is very light hammer strokes. Just letting the hammer do the work. We're going to do the same thing on the other side. Just enough to start the idea, and then we're going to switch to a smaller chisel. Now, I'm going to take it from the middle of that space between the blood drop and the back of the bird, and I'm going to walk it in because there's a little bit of a ledge. And you want to think about this. You want to think about this as more of sculpting than I'm going to hammer this into submission. You want to have nice light, and you're going to just finesse it in a little bit at a time. It is always better to have, like, when in doubt, hit it lighter. Worst case is you're going to do it a little bit more often. So right now, the back is 80% where I want it, 90% for depth. I'm going to use this chisel. Again, this is the smaller of the ovals, or the medium of the small ovals. That doesn't make sense. I'm going to walk a channel in here, and then I'm going to push this way into the bird, and then this way into the blood drop, and then the same thing on this side. So we're going to start here. Okay. Oh, I just did it again. I'm sorry, guys. In towards the beak, and then we're going to go towards the drop, very light. In fact, actually, now is when I'm going to switch to very small 2-ounce hammer. I'm going to use a 2-ounce hammer because I want very small amounts of movement. And we're just walking it up to the edge of the lining for the blood drop. Same thing from the other side. I'll switch camera angles. And we're just this hammer doesn't stay together. Don't judge me. And we're just going to walk it into the edge of the lining of that blood drop. Now, we have not depressed the gap yet. So back here, it's super well depressed for the background. Here, it's decent. Right here, we haven't. That's okay. I'm working on this angle here, and then I'm going to come through that channel next. Make sure the hammer's in. Okay. Now I'm actually working a little bit towards the, now I'm working towards the crest of the head. You can see it taking shape. It's taking shape very quickly, and that's the awesome part. Now I'm going to work a little bit of the back side of that crest. One thing to notice, or one thing I'll mention, when I'm working what I'll call vertical walls, like imagine scaling Yosemite, it's up like this. So I use these chisels that are any size shaped like this. I'll use it flat ways to sculpt it up. And then at some point, it's not going to quite be even unless you're amazing and you're Ugo. And you need to kind of even up the face of the ice wall. if that makes sense. Imagine it's wavy and you need to just even it up. Instead of doing this, just walking up, I'll take the same chisel and turn it sideways, and I'll walk it over very lightly, and that'll let me just smooth it out. Wanted to mention that. Before I keep going, we have 11 minutes left. Things I'm not going to be able to show you, which I'll do right now. So this is the bird. On the base of the bird, there's a swirl. I'm going to use a thicker, less sharp liner, and I'm going to widen those lines in the swirl, on the back. I might do 1 or 2 on the back side just to make it more nice. So the eye right here is lined. I'm going to use a very small dapping punch. For anybody who doesn't know what dapping punches are, they're basically you get a block and some round things and you make holes. I'm going to use the smallest circular tool that I have. You can do it with the ovals. You just have to be more careful. But luckily with this, I can just top down and then make a little bit of circle. And that's going to do the eye. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to be able to show the lines, the eye, or this portion. So this cavity right here, which is like if I'm the bird, it's this cavity. We're going to do the same process. Start in the middle, a little bit of depression, and then work towards where you need that vertical wall. But what we are going to do is finish up around the blood drop. So I'm really sorry. I did my best to fit this in 2 hours, guys. I got 9 minutes left. I'm super sorry that I couldn't finish it, but hopefully this has a good idea. And if anyone has any questions, needs any better explanation, wants any pictures, I can even send you a picture of what we lined out if you like this design. It's super simple, but I'm going to get to work for the last little bit, and then anybody can message me. I've done this art for a couple years off and on, but I'm not exceptionally good at this. It's not what I'm known for. I'd love to change that if I can get good enough, but it's not what I'm known for, but I enjoy it a lot. And I just wanted to be able to share this because I've had, so that lamp piece, I started with a flat sheet of copper on site at Great Helm in the Baronetius Theater in Atenveldt. And I started with a flat sheet of copper and I made every single bit of that on site. And I just set up a table and people came and I was able to explain and show things, and it was super cool. And I loved it. So when this collegium idea came out, I was like, I don't know that I'm really feeling the weaving. Also, there's 3 really amazing weaving classes, and I'd love to do something different. But I don't know that, like, this isn't something that you can just go, oh, I'm going to go to this class and then magically do it. But so many people don't know how to take this and turn it into this. So many people just don't know, and I just wanted to share that. So I really appreciate everybody that's been here the whole time as we're finishing up the last 6 minutes. And I'm gonna talk and I'm gonna show where we're doing. What we're doing is we're just taking all the lines around the head, the neck, the back line, the nest, and we're just crisping them up towards those original design lines that we created. And we're just crisping it up. And then we're, again, working towards that blood drop. And I'll show exactly where we finish at the end. When I have the lining and we're depressing the back and the point that I'm working up, when you're using these embossers, you can literally walk it up to the point of where that hard line is that you originally did for the design, and then it disappears. It's fantastic. So that's what I like to use as my measure, because then it disappears. The nice part about being able to walk it up, so right now I'm going to work in the crest right there. And what I'm doing is I'm walking it up to that hard line, and then it disappears, so I don't I don't have to planish it. It gets kind of sculpted away. I'm gonna try to find an example. Let's use the blood drop. So I'm gonna try to get super close. If you can look, where is it? If you can look at the blood drop, if you can visually see the lines, it's really hard to tell. Right about here, there's a hard line and the sculpting is right below it. And I'm gonna try to work this real quick so I can get rid of that and show you guys. But I'm just walking it up. There we go. Almost there, hold on. I'm sorry you guys can't see this super well. We're almost done. I'm just trying to hit this line so I can show you. All right, I'm gonna grab a smaller, it's a similar embossing tool. It's just more tiny. It's not gonna focus well. So I don't know if you guys can tell, but if you look really closely on the blood, you can't see anything. Anyway, the hard lines on the blood drop are done. We started with nothing. We got to here, and this is where we got. That's where we got to. I'm sorry, the camera's literally moving backwards despite facing forward. So that's where we got to. So I'm gonna try to talk for just a second with a liner so I can use as a pointer. What I would do after this, that swirl line right there, we're gonna widen that up. We're gonna widen that line up, and then we're gonna depress all of that just like we did this, and then along with there. But even if I just took this out right now, the only thing I'd really have to change is knocking down that portion right there. But I can give that to somebody and go, hey, here's a pelican medallion, and everybody knows what it looks like. So that's where we got to. I'm sorry I don't have enough time to finish, guys, but if anyone has any questions whatsoever, please let me know. And what we're gonna end up doing is, you can see, oh my God, why? I'm just gonna look at the thing. So you can see, obviously there's a circle line. We're gonna draw that in imaginary, and we're gonna end up cutting this out after we're done. Maybe backfilling because it really doesn't weigh much, or we might try those rolled edges because that was a super cool idea. But if anybody has anything that they need from me or would like from me, let me know. Thank you guys so much for coming. I'm like so enthralled by how many people are here. You guys have no idea how good that makes me feel. I took a $550 class for 3 days, and it's funny to say that the biggest thing I learned from that was metal moves like clay, but suddenly it made this journey much better. And then I picked up the dishing, and it just makes relief. Like, I can make small things like this will be a point on a medallion or on a cornet, and that's fine. Or I can do this from the same thickness of metal, and it's just crazy. So I'm glad I could teach you guys some stuff, and Zip, you can pick up some stuff. I'm gonna at least shut up. I'm not gonna sign off because I'm gonna be here for shield painting class, but I love you guys. If anybody has any questions, find me on Facebook, Demetrios Alexander McLarnon. That's my name, and happy to have anything. So thanks for coming along.